One of the high points of the rally was a speech by Urvahsi Vaid, Executive Director of the National Lesbian and Gay Task Force.
On behalf of 25 million lesbian and gay Americans, I stand before you to state that full equality and freedom is non-negotiable. That a woman's right to control her sexual and reproductive life is non-negotiable. And no one, not the church, not the state, and certainly not cowardly politicians who bend whichever way the wind blows like George Bush, will ever take away from the women of this land the power to determine our lives. I'm proud to stand before you as an out, avowed, proud lesbian because my presence here represents one historically unacknowledged fact. The fact that lesbians and gay men have been marching, lobbying, and voting for reproductive freedom and choice for decades. In fact, I want everyone who's lesbian, gay, or bisexual who can hear me to raise your hands right now. Keep them up, keep them up. I want everyone who has a family member, a friend, or someone you love who's gay, lesbian, or bisexual to raise your hand right now. Keep it up. Now I want everyone who can hear me, who believes in equal justice under the law, in the human dignity and fundamental humanity of all people, regardless of sexual orientation, to raise your hands. All right. Hello, hello. Where have you people been all my life? Thank you. What brings us all to Houston today is our commitment to the principle that women have the right to control our wombs and our lives. And I want to point out to you some implications of reproductive freedom for gay men and lesbians. Reproductive freedom means not just the right to an abortion, but the principle of individual freedom from government control. Reproductive freedom encompasses the struggle of gay and lesbian parents face in this country to keep custody of our own children, to have access to adoption and foster care, to be judged by our merit as parents and not by our sexual orientation. Reproductive freedom encompasses our struggle to eradicate laws that criminalize our sexuality, such as the Texas sodomy law. Shame, Texas. Fundamentally, actually, the issue that we rally here for today isn't even reproductive freedom. It's an issue of power. And we're here this week in Houston to say very clearly to George Bush and the Republican Party that the pro-choice vote has the power to defeat you this fall. My friends, we, you, and you, every one of us, we have the power to ensure that George Bush cannot govern a people he has chosen not to serve. The last few weeks have been filled with a tremendous amount of talk about morality. We who are lesbian and gay in this crowd know what I'm talking about, really, and you who are feminists and pro-choice know what I'm talking about. We're called immoral by the Christo-fascists who dominate the Republican Party today. We who are feminists are called immoral women. We who are gay are called sinners. We who are black, Latino, Asian, or people of color are called immoral because we live in single-family households, because we are sometimes poor, because we are different. Well, I want everyone here to understand one fact. Morality has no gender, morality has no race, and morality has no sexual orientation. Morality, my friends, is not the monopoly of anyone wearing a collar. Morality is measured not by rhetorical flourish or language, but measured by the output of good deeds and good work being done by so many of you and by our allies all over this country who are working every day to address the pressing problems our communities face. I want to ask you, who is activist Karen Thompson, who fought for 7 years to gain custody of her disabled partner in life? It wasn't Karen who's immoral, but it's President George Bush who denounces gay and lesbian families as unnatural. Who is immoral? Is it the millions of lesbians and gay men, you straight allies, we who have built and funded and paid for the AIDS service organizations in this country while our government does nothing? Or is it Patrick Buchanan who says gay men are to blame for the epidemic we suffer? Shame! Who is a sinner? Is it President Bush? Isn't it President Bush who has presided over 2 administrations that have failed to lead us while more than 150,000 people with HIV disease have died in this country alone? We gather at this convention, my friends, as witnesses to a powerful moment in the history of our time. This is a moment that offers us a clear and present choice. You can call it a choice between justice and immorality. You can call it a choice between the status quo and something really different. Or you can call it a choice between good and evil. Because on one side are all of us and our families and friends and colleagues all over this country. All of us who represent a pro-choice, pro-human, compassionate, just and freedom-loving alternative. All of us who believe that the government's job is to minister to the health and welfare of all its people. On the other side are the people who are running that party. On the other side are the forces that run this country today, the forces of cynicism and danger, who say they will do anything to win, anything to keep their power. Believe you me, they will stoop to anything. The forces of evil that shut their eyes and ears to the lives of the poor and the disenfranchised. The forces of evil that have no idea that family means people who care about each other and love each other, not a patriarch who's served by a mom in an apron baking cookies. Let us remember, my friends, when times look bleak, that when we are united, we are not the minority, but together we are the majority. Let us remember when we see horrible court decisions returned by judges who have sold their souls for their jobs, that we have the power to disobey, to overturn, and to challenge and change any unjust law. Let us remember when times are bleak that this quilt that we make across the divisive and loaded and manipulated lines of gender and race, class and sexual orientation, geography and ability and so on, that this community of people that we make are the face of true morality. The choice is ours. The power to change is in our hands. Thank you for being here.
But I really feel very moved, and I don't know if it's the exhaustion of not having any sleep and the intensity of the emotions that I feel, but I feel very moved by a lot of what people have said tonight, and inspired to go on. I appreciate your courage in standing up and saying something that disagrees with some of what we said. I appreciate Jim's standing up and saying that he doesn't think the task force strategy is right. I think that kind of disagreement is what you're talking about when you say dissent. And it's so different from trashing. That kind of disagreement exists in our community, and it's okay, because here we are under the same house, still, and committed still to working together. I want to leave us with some observations. As somebody who lives in the vortex of evil, Washington, D.C., and not in this city, I heard a lot things about Houston over the years. You have a rich history in the gay liberation movement here in Houston. The 80s were incredible times for this community. The caucus was one of the finest organizations, the Houston Gay Lesbian Political Caucus, in the country, second to none in the organizing and the advocacy work you were doing. There's a long tradition of fierce activism embodied by people like Ray Hill here, and Pokey Anderson, and Anise. And there's a new tradition from people like Paul and the other activists. And what I heard about Houston and what I have seen in my 3 different visits here so far, I came here in January, came here in February, and I've been here all week, and I'll be back again, and again. But what I see, I tell you folks, you have a very, very strong and rich and interesting community. You have so much depth here in the gay and lesbian community. You have all the elements and I do agree with Jack, I agree with you that this last year is like a rebirth, a renaissance of the gay liberation movement in Houston. I really want to leave you with that outsider's perspective of hope, because I've heard a lot of negative things over the last visits. Oh, I tell you, Urvashi, people down here, they don't want to get involved. Well, 2,000 people were at that demonstration on Monday night, and I want to tell you, they weren't from outside of Houston. The majority for you all was local people who made up the ranks, local people whose anger is reaching a boiling point and whose desire for being involved is so great right now because of all the things that we talked about and because of the context. So I really, really want to encourage every single one of you, every single one of you. There are 2 organizations are here that live here and work here, and there are many more represented in the room. But I want to talk about these 2 because they are, the national organizations, local allies, and arms. And Queer Nation meets every Tuesday night at 7:30. The next meeting of the Houston Caucus is September 2nd at 7:30.
The first Wednesday of every month.
The first Wednesday of every month. I should know. I put the message on the machine. And please come and get involved. There is a role for every single voice in this room. There is a role, whether it's stuffing the envelopes or answering the phone. You have a community that has a tremendous amount of work ahead of it on the violence front, on the non-discrimination front, to change policies and regulations and laws, on the sodomy law front at the state level, on the parent and domestic partnership front, and on the AIDS front. You've got a community that has a lot of work to do. And each of us has a role, so I'm proud. I want to thank you. I want to thank you profoundly, the Houston community. You've made it an extremely powerful week. And what has happened here, this is not, it's been the site of a national event, namely the Republican Convention, but it's also been the site of something, of a defining moment for the gay and lesbian movement. This is a defining moment in our history. We have the battle, I've been singing that Dylan song all week, battle lines are being drawn, That's what's happening right here in your town. And let's all work together, whatever our vision is of what we need to achieve and whatever our ways are of getting there. We've got a role to play in our movement. I thank you very much, very, very much. I'm very proud to be a lesbian and part of our movement. All right.
Well, it's been a real active week. We've done a range of press conferences, protests, and media outreach and community meetings. The week has For example, we did a press conference that laid out the gay and lesbian movement's agenda and why we fight for civil rights, what discrimination we face, and talked a little bit about the experience we've had in trying to get the Republican Party to deal with the gay and lesbian community and our problems. We had another press conference that featured mothers' voices against AIDS, which and was a very powerful press conference, which featured several mothers from around the country who have kids who are struggling with AIDS, from babies to a young man to a young woman, both heterosexual and gay, because AIDS is not limited to people's sexual orientation. AIDS affects all sorts of people, and it's a real myth to see it as a disease of one particular segment. It's a disease, not an orientation. And anyway, the mothers spoke very powerfully about what they think the federal government needs to do, what more we need from our political leaders. I've been profoundly moved is the word that I've been feeling all day by what has happened this week. The gay community has become the target of an outright assault by elements of the Republican Party and by George Bush himself. This is a calculated political strategy on the part of the Bush campaign to win his re-election. He is trying to win on the backs of anti-gay prejudice. I think that's wrong. And I don't just think that's wrong because I'm a lesbian. I think that's wrong because I think it's an immoral and hateful strategy. I don't want a president who panders to hate. I don't mind if my president disagrees with me. That's not the issue here. It's not about disagreement. It's about pandering to the worst elements of intolerance and prejudice and bigotry in our society. I'm scared by what this gay bashing, this verbal gay bashing means is physical gay bashing in the street. It lends sanction to it. It legitimizes it. And that's one thing we've seen this whole week, and we're troubled by it. And we're going to call it, we're going to name it, and we're going to challenge it from every forum we can between now and the election, because we have to. The second thing that I'm alarmed by is the lack of respect and focus to what this AIDS health crisis means to this country. People need to understand that the gay community is motivated and angry and out in the street demonstrating because we have been so profoundly affected by this health crisis in this country. Internationally, AIDS is a heterosexual disease, actually. Internationally, AIDS affects women much more than men. And even in this country, the fastest new incidence of HIV infection is happening among heterosexual women. They're the highest. Women are the highest rising numbers of new AIDS cases in this country. At the percentage growth is the highest. And yet what I'm saying doesn't contradict that. What I'm saying is that in this country, the gay community has been profoundly affected. Now, I have lost too many people to this disease. Dear friends of mine, dear colleagues, incredible leaders, and I've had enough. And I'm not going to put up with George Bush's stonewalling. And that's what that march on Monday was about. People who've had enough of stonewalling and know we can't spend more, but they find money for any little pork barrel project in the congressperson or member's district, and they find money for B-2 bombers, and they find money for all sorts of projects, but they will not adopt the fight against AIDS as a national priority. It's a lie what the Bush administration is saying about AIDS, that they're doing enough. It's an outright lie. The Independent National Commission on AIDS said as much a couple of weeks ago when they issued a press release challenging the president's. He appointed half those people, and they stood up and said, you're wrong.
In addition to AIDS, what are some of the other primary concerns of your organization?
A couple of concerns that are important to us are ending discrimination based on sexual orientation. We don't want special rights. That's never what the gay and lesbian movement has advocated. We want equal rights. We want equal justice under the law. We would like to not be fired from our jobs for being who we are. And we would like to live in peace alongside the rest of society. That is what we want. And the other piece of what we want, which is going to be frankly harder to get, is respect. I don't think that's so outrageous or outlandish, but I think it's going to be harder to get because there's a lot of disagreement in society. There's a lot of tension. People have a lot of conflict about how to deal with sexuality in this society. And there's a lot of disagreeing, opposing viewpoints. Now, I believe in democracy, and I believe passionately in it. I believe in the Constitution of this country. And so I respect people who disagree with me, or try to, even when it's hard to. I really try. And I don't get that same respect from the delegates at this convention. We certainly haven't gotten that respect from the president. We have not gotten that respect from the fundamentalist far right. I think it's shameful that these people call themselves Christians and use the power of that authority, of that respect that is accorded to religious leaders in this country. They use that. They abuse that, in my opinion, when they go out and bash and defame and spread lies about gay people. You cannot condemn a whole class of people in the way that they do without lying. I am not condemning the whole class of fundamentalists. I think there are people out there who legitimately, genuinely, in all sincerity disagree. And, okay, but we live in a pluralistic society, and I believe in it, and I'm committed to it, and that's what I'm fighting for. I'm fighting for the space to live my life freely and in peace. Now, to some people, that's a threat. To some people, that very act of allowing me to live as an open lesbian, allowing me to work as a lawyer as an open lesbian, is threatening. I don't think, I think that's the fundamental tension that we're going to have to resolve over the next 4 or 5 years in this country.
What are some things that local citizens can do to further the cause of the task force?
Houston is a very dynamic gay and lesbian community. You've got a lot of exciting organizations that are service organizations, AIDS organizations, youth organizations, community service groups that people can get involved with. There are also a couple of different political organizations that I would strongly urge people to get involved with at the local level. Our movement is driven by volunteer love and volunteer energy. We are not deep pocket multinational corporations. We are not as well funded as our opponents. Believe me. And so people can get involved with the Houston Gay and Lesbian Political Caucus, which meets on a regular basis. People can get involved with the Queer Nation Houston chapter, if that's a strategy that they're comfortable with. It doesn't matter which strategy you choose. They're all okay. You have to find a place for yourself in your community and get involved. That's my message to everybody that I've been speaking to here in Houston. Take responsibility, because wake up. Gay people need to wake up to what's happening in this town and in this country. This is a defining moment for gay and lesbian people in this country, what's happening at this convention. For the first time in American history, a major political party is engaging in massive gay bashing. For the first time in American history, they are saying they are going to use this issue to win a presidential election campaign. And it's hateful and it's spiteful. It's wrong.